Hello everybody, I'm James from Outdoor Chattanooga. Today's virtual learning opportunity is going to be going over how to fix a flat on a bicycle. Today I've got a few examples of flat tires on a variety of different bicycles. So I'm going to talk about how to identify what caused the flat, and then removing the wheel and fixing the flat and putting everything back together. So a few tools you're going to need to remove your wheel and fix your flat are going to be either an adjustable wrench or a 15mm wrench, depending on what you have, tire levers, a new tube, and of course a bicycle pump. So you got a flat on your bike. One of the main things you need to know is what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a kid bike, you're likely going to need the 15mm wrench to remove the wheel. If you're dealing with a kid bike, again, you're probably going to need a 15mm wrench, and simply take the lefty loosen to take the nuts off to remove the wheel. This should work front and rear. Loosen the nuts, remove the washers, and the wheel should pop off. This bike has a through axle. To remove a through axle, simply open the lever to the open position, unscrew it until it lets go, and then pull the axle out, and then your wheel is off. Removing the rear wheel can be a little more challenging as you have gears to mess with, rear derailleur. But again, with the quick release, you're gonna pull the lever to the open position, give it a spin or two, and then just be mindful of your chain and your derailleur. Move it around so that you can get the chain away from the cassette here. And when you lay the bike down, lay it down on the left side, the non-drive side, to prevent any further damage to your bicycle. When removing your rear wheel, before you do anything, you want to shift it to the highest gear, the hardest gear. Make sure it's all the way in that smallest cog, and then it's ready to remove. So our bicycle here has the V-brake system, and to remove the V-brake, you want to squeeze these two levers together and essentially get this metal piece here past this so that it opens up the brake. This particular bike has a quick release on the rear. You want to flip that lever to open position. From there, you want to pick up on either the seat or the frame, pick up on the bike, hold down on the wheel, and work the chain away from the cassette. With one hand, pick the bike up, and then the other hand kind of push down on the wheel and the tire and work it off. Once you have the wheel off the bike, you're going to need to remove the tire from the wheel. Before you do that, you want to make sure all of the air is out of the current tube. If you have a Presta valve, take the valve cover off, and then this particular valve type, you have to unscrew this as well to let any air out. Once you have all the air out, you're going to use your tire levers to remove the tire from the rim. I like to start on the opposite end of where the valve is. So if the valve's here, I'm going to start on this end. I'm going to push the tire over so that I can see the bead, which is the innermost part of the tire. I'm going to grab it with the spoon end of the tire lever. I'm going to simply pull it over and use the hook to hook the spoke. Once you have the first tire lever hooked, you can move over a few inches for the second one. Do the same thing. Grab the bead and pull it over, and from here you can push all the way around. Maybe even start back at the top where you started and pull all the way around until one side of the tire is completely removed from the rim. Once your tire is off, halfway off, you're going to remove the inner tube, simply pulling it out and then pulling the valve out of the valve hole, and this is your inner tube. We don't know what caused the flat on this bike, so that's what we need to figure out next. You want to make sure all the air is out of the tire you want to break the bead. So when you break the bead on the tire, you're simply just squeezing, getting the tire away from the rim, just like this. This is the rim, this is the spoke, and this is the hub, just for reference. And then the tire has, this is the bead, the very end of the inside of the tire. This is the sidewall and tread. So just some basic knowledge there. These are your tire levers. There's a spoon in and a hook in. You want to take this spoon in, go underneath and grab the bead, like I mentioned earlier, the very inside of the tire. Hook the bead with that spoon in. The hook can hook onto the spoke. All right, now I'm gonna take a second one. I'm gonna go a few spokes over and do the same thing. Grab the bead, simply roll it over the rim and hook it. And at this point, with this one, we can just roll the tire off. Generally, I don't take the tire all the way off because later it helps you figure out what caused the flat. And I'm gonna guess the valve is messed up on this, causing this flat. The metal on the rim can actually cut the valve. As you can see here, some cuts in the valve, but I don't know for sure. So another type of flat is a puncture flat. You ran over something, you got something in the tire that punctured the tube, causing your tube to instantly go flat. Another one is a snake bite. If you're running soft tires and these tires are really underflated, a snake bite can happen. You hit something, the tire pinches the tube on the rim, causing two little slits that look like a snake bite. So when inspecting for your flat, what caused it? It could be from the rim strip being placed on the rim incorrectly. So here's an example. This is taped on. You can see that it covers the nipple hole of the rim all the way around. And again, you just want to inspect this to make sure this isn't the reason you're getting flat tires on your bicycle. We don't know what happened with this one, so I'm going to air this tire up and try to figure out what caused the flat. Not all pumps can accommodate all tubes. So I mentioned this valve being a Presta valve. This particular pump has a hole that's smaller for the Presta valve and a hole that's bigger for the Schrader valve. So again, pushing this into the smaller hole, pushing the lever down to lock it on this particular pump, and then airing it up to figure out where your hole might be. Once you've added a little air, this particular tube has what's known as the snake bite. The snake bite on a tube has generally two cuts from where it hit the tire, pinched the rim, right here and right here, you can really see. So snake bite's pretty easy to identify. If it is a thorn, you're gonna wanna, it's going to be a slow leak. You're going to air the tube up a pretty good bit before you can find the hole. Try to find the little hole. You can also sprinkle some water on the tube. You can also check the actual tire for anything. You can use a piece of cloth. If it is something sharp, it will catch on the cloth and not your fingers. Go all the way around the inside. Whatever caused the puncture, you're going to want to find inside the tire here and remove that. Anyway, once you figure out what caused your flat, you can go ahead and replace it with a new tube. So if you don't know what size tube you're going to need, you can find that information on the sidewall of your tire. So here, this bike has a 26-inch wheel, so the tire is 26-inch by 2. That's going to be what tube size you need. When you're looking at tubes in your local bike shop, it's going to have different sizes. So this is 26 and it's good for 1.5 to 2 inches. So this tube would work. Other than it's a Presta valve, and this particular setup requires a Schrader valve. So you need to make sure you know that as well. There are two different types. It can be a Presta valve like this one, and with the Presta valve, it has an actual little screw here that you want to undo before you can add or take away air. So make sure you undo that. It's oftentimes overlooked. People try to put air in their tube with it closed, and they have a hard time, vice versa, hard time letting it out. So make sure you unscrew that for your Presta valve. This is the Schrader valve. This is not a good example because you can tell that it's has an angle to it, so your valve should always be straight. But either way, has a valve cap. You can remove this cap, and then you can press in here to take away air, put your pump on there to add air. If your bicycle can only accommodate a press-to valve and you get a Schrader, it's not going to work out for you. This bicycle needs a 27 and an inch and a quarter. So 27 inch is what we need for this one. Another bike over here is probably 700C. That's a common size. 26 inch, 29 inch. There are a variety of sizes. So just make sure you check on your tire what size tube you need before ordering or going out and buying one. And then when you get it, it's going to be completely deflated. Before you install it, you want to add a little air to it. With your tube slightly inflated, you want to make sure that you don't let it hit the ground, any dirt, pick up any debris. If you do that and put it in, the pressure could puncture the tube again and you still have a flat. To start, I would put the valve into the valve hole here, all the way, and then start to tuck the tube in, working your way on the opposite sides, tucking it in the tire until it's all the way tucked in. Once the tube is inside the tire, you're going to fold the bead, the innermost part of the tire here, back onto the rim. And we're going to start opposite of where we took it off. So we're going to start at the valve, simply roll it over, and again you're going to do just like you did with the tube, chasing it on both sides, otherwise it'll just come off as you go around and around and around. And then it's gonna start to tighten up here. Once you get here, you can use your tire lever, or with some practice, you can just roll this bead onto the rim with your hands. Put the valve in at the valve hole. Once the valve is in, I tuck the tube into the tire, working on both sides all the way around. Once the tube is tucked in, you want to start at the valve, opposite of taking it off. Start at the valve and roll the bead onto the rim. You want to make sure you do it on both sides at the same time, otherwise you'll just chase the tire off of the rim. So once you get about here, it's going to get a little tight. Just keep pushing, and it rolls on. Nice and simple with this particular setup, but not always. You might sometimes need to use those the tire levers again. And then from here, we'll air our tire up, pump the tire up to the recommended tire pressure, which should also be labeled on the side wall. Tire pressure 90 psi, that's pretty high. But also pretty common with these skinny tires. I do like to check the bead to make sure it's pretty even all the way around. And the bead line, there's this little line. Just want to make sure it's not tucked underneath the rim. Once you look around, all the way around, looks pretty good. Should roll pretty smooth. And then you want to put the front wheel back on, or rear, whichever you're working with. So when putting your rear wheel back on, kind of reverse the process. Hold the bike up by the seat, bring your wheel back over, and you're aiming to get this cassette here in between this chain space here. So bring it over and set this top part of the chain on the cog, and just let the weight of the bike kind of drop in. And you're trying to get this axle, this is the dropout. The axle in the dropout here. Line that up, make sure it's all the way down on both sides, come back over here to your non-drop side, pull your quick release back to the closed position, and then reattach your brakes. Once your brakes are attached, give the wheel a good spin, squeeze the brakes, make sure your brakes are still working properly, and continue your ride. With this style of brake, you have these little bars that can come out from behind the brake. If you see this, it's not a big deal. Your brakes will still work, but you don't want this hanging out. So all you have to do is simply push it over and tuck it back underneath here. So putting the wheel back on your disc brake bike, put your chain on. This particular bike's a single speed, so just have one gear to worry about, and then line the dropout up with the axle. And you're also going to be mindful of your brake here. So this is the brake rotor. You don't want to touch it with your fingers. It can contaminate it and it won't work as well. So just make sure it's lining up with the brake caliper. Just like that. Nice and easy. Put your axle back in. Give it a few twists. Pull the lever up back to the closed position. Check the brake, make sure it's not rubbing, and you're good to go. Get the wheel nice and snug in the dropouts. You don't want this quick release to be too loose. You should have a nice impression of it in your palm once you close it. If you're having to really push in too hard, loosen the side, make it so that it's easy for you to close again, so that you have a little indentation and that you can read closed. Maybe you can really see that closed right there. And your flat is fixed.